Hi, everyone. I'm super excited to be here. And as I mentioned earlier, we're going to talk a little bit about the same first APIs. We're going to focus on OpenAPI spec, which is just one of the different ways to do it. But I believe that it's going to be super helpful for you to start with this. And if you know something else that does the same job, it's actually good to learn something new. So let's get started. All right. So as I mentioned, I believe this is the key message of this talk. This is what I learned in multiple projects. The biggest challenge to solve is not only the knowledge; it's also communication. And most of the time, communication is the main thing to solve in a technical project. So the idea of this talk is to give you tools to focus on that. And since we are geeks, we like to solve technological challenges. We're going to use technology for it. So let's get started. Some useful links for you. This is the first one is a link to the presentation. So if you want to go through it on your laptop, you can click on that link, and also you can review the slides later. And also there's a workshop that is about this presentation. It's not 100% accurate, and actually you may find some bugs, but it's a GitHub repo. So if you find any bugs, feel free to send the PR, and we're going to be linked to there. So the next level, I'm working on the second phase of this workshop, and it's going to be super helpful if you guys want to send me something like a pull request or an issue or something to improve. Now, a little bit about me. I'm a full stack developer, as I mentioned earlier. I'm an international speaker. I really like to talk. Although English is not my first language, I really like to learn and try to be the best speaker about a particular topic. And for that, I need to talk with multiple people, and I need to share what I know and listen to a lot of people. So that's why I'm here. I recently changed the companies, and now I'm working as an engineering manager at Modo. But this is brand new. It's like this is my first week in Modo, so that's why we talked about MuleSoft first, and now I'm mentioning that. But you may want to ask me if you want to know more about MuleSoft. You can also pick me, and I'm gonna do my best to help you with that. And as mentioned earlier, I'm a Microsoft MVP and co-organizer of multiple conferences, and I'm gonna go and mention all of them because you have a screenshot here. But if you want to know more, feel free to contact me using Twitter, and I can expand more on this. All right, so let's talk about the scenario. And I want to mention the scenario because I really believe that when we build something, we need to focus on what we want to achieve, and that means what are the objectives of the things that we're doing, and most precisely, what are we trying to solve. So for that, the first thing you need to understand is the scenario you're at. And that's why I'm going to try to cover it. This is a sample scenario, but it's something that we did. Actually, this is a real-life example. So the idea of this presentation is to talk about this real application. This is the vOpen Tech website. And the reason why I'm mentioning this particular example is because when we created this conference, vOpen, we decided to make it a Latin American conference that is held in multiple countries. We're talking about 4 countries right now. Of course, given the situation that we have this year, we're going to have a virtual conference this year, but last year we had the event in Argentina and Uruguay. And next year we're planning to have it in Argentina, Uruguay, Chile, Colombia, and Mexico. So this is how big this conference is. And since we are talking with multiple local communities, we want to make this collaborative and open source. And that's why we decided to spin up an API to gather all the information of all the conferences around Latin America, but also website. And that's how big this project is. And of course, we have a mobile application that is used during the conference. It is not only an application for attendees, it's also an application for organizers and for sponsors. So everything is centralized in an API. And the idea of today is that we're going to talk a little bit about a few functionalities to figure out how we can do this in the real life, or how we did it in the real life. So let's get into it. Now, I mentioned earlier the team is composed of different people working remotely with different cultural, let's say, differences, but it's not really a difference. It's like they have a different way of approaching to the same problem. And the idea is that because we are remote, it's always hard to try to sync up. So usually when you are working in the same office, you can approach to that person directly and ask the question right away. But when you are remote, and we know this because of this year, it's harder. So it's not as simple as it seems. Now, what about the use cases? So the idea is that we're going to cover 3 use cases today, but of course, it expands to more use cases. The idea is that this API or the thing that we're going to build is going to retrieve all the speakers of a particular conference. Let's say we're talking about the conference in Argentina. So we could configure our API in a way that it receives a country, Argentina, and it retrieves all the speakers of the Argentina conference and the edition of this year, right? Because we have multiple editions, one per year. Now, the same way, we wanna see all the activities of a particular conference. Again, the Argentina conference in 2019, let's say. And that is going to be used by the website to list the agenda, but also to the mobile application is going to use it to display the same information, but in a different medium. As I mentioned, this is important. And also, the agenda covers speakers and activities. And that's why I wanted to mention this first, because you usually build something on top of small things. And that's what we're going to try to discover today. And last, the idea is that when you have the agenda and you attend to a particular presentation like this one, we wanted to get early feedback from the attendees. And that's why we added some write endpoints to post information about the feedback, right? I'm talking about REST. Probably I said post on purpose, but we're not into it. If you don't know what I meant, I'm going to try to explain it later. Now, and since we kind of raised our hands, but let's try to do a quick exercise. The idea is that I'm going to mention different ways of doing this, and we're going to try to find the best way of doing this with the less effort, right? Because we're kind of lazy. We're developers, and we don't want to do a lot of work manually. We want to like automate everything. So let's get into it. So the first approach, right? Raise your hands, the ones that have faced this before, right? Have you heard this before? Somebody telling you, hey, can you send me the doc of your service? When I say docs, I'm talking about a document, right? It could be a real physical document, and that cannot be done if you're working remote, so that doesn't work. Also, I'm talking about Google Docs. So let's say Google Docs is the answer, right? What's the problem? What's the problem with it, right? Let's say you don't have it. And the answer usually is just use it. Just use my service. You will know exactly what you need to do or how you can integrate with my service if you use it. Now, that's kind of a problem, right? Because maybe by just using it is not enough. And what happens if the service is down? So the next step is, okay, I'm gonna give you the doc, or I don't need a Google Doc. I'm gonna give you the code, a link to my code, and then you will figure out exactly how to integrate with my service. And this is the usual phrase you hear when this happens. Is like, okay, I don't need docs for my code. By just reading at the code, you will figure out exactly how to integrate. Now, what happens if your code has bugs? You're basically not explaining the intention of your code because the bug is telling a different thing to the reader. So that's one example of the problems that you may have. And there's another example in the screenshot that basically is by reading at the code or by using the service. That's not the real. I mean, that's not explains exactly how you can use a service because of bugs and because the service could be down. So you are basically blocking somebody that wants to use your service. And then again, let's use the usual or the old Google Docs, which is the traditional solution, right? The problem with this is that all of this is manual, and it's not part of your code. It's not even part of your service. It's something that is in parallel and that is manually updated. So the problem with this, and I have experienced this in the past, is that people doesn't update the documentation very often. So sometimes you read something in Google Docs, but then when you use the service, there's a different behavior. So it is, although this is better than just giving you the GitHub repo and the endpoint, let's say, or the URL of the service, it's not enough. It's not enough. We need to do something better. So let's figure it out together. Now, as a summary, let's say you don't have docs. Let's say you want to integrate to a service and you can't receive docs. You just receive the URL. So that's, to me, not the ideal solution. It's actually the worst solution. Now, let's say the documentation is the code. Okay, that's slightly better, but it's not enough. As I mentioned earlier, if you have a bug, then it's hard to explain the intention of your code to the consumer. And last, you have this Google Docs or a doc documentation, which is, I believe, better than the other two, but again, you still have something to fix because it's manual. Now the question I raise to you, is there a better way? Yes, there is, and you may know about this. And if you don't know it, I suggest you guys to start looking at, for instance, Google APIs. They do a really good job about documenting their APIs because they want people to consume those APIs. And the best way to help other people to use them is to give something like an API portal. This is one of the names of this type of documentation, but more or less it's an automated documentation of your APIs that explains not only how to use your APIs in terms of code, right? You're looking at an HTTP request, you're looking about technical documentation, maybe you have some examples so you can learn how to use them, but also there is some text, there are some descriptions of what you use, what you should expect about the usage of this service, which is actually made by humans, right? Machines cannot automate this, so it involves the two pieces, like automated documentation that it can be retrieved while you are coding, but also human documentation that explains the intention, and that's, I believe, the best of all worlds. So now the question that you may have is, okay, this is great, but how can I do this? Should I have to build something? And the quick answer is no. There are tools around that you can use for this. So let's see something about it, and let's start with this. Writing your first OAuth document. So before we explain what an OAuth document is, I need to give you some background. So first of all, we're going to use Swagger. Now, and Swagger is an open source software framework that is now a platform, and we're going to use that platform to build these OAuth documents or OpenAPI documents. So the idea is that this platform will give us automated documentation, code generation, and test case generation, and it's only going to require us to build a document, right? An OAuth document. So we're going to get some things for free by just writing some document. I want to see what that means in a little bit. Now, I mentioned this earlier, so maybe this is the first time you hear about it. When I say OAuth, I'm talking about OpenAPI. And Swagger was the former name of OpenAPI. That's why you're probably gonna hear it or we're gonna see it in the internet. But the idea is that when I talk about Swagger, I'm talking about the platform that we're gonna use right now, right after this slide. But when I'm talking about OpenAPI, I'm talking about standard, the way to write the document. The document is gonna be written in YAML, and it's gonna be a contract of your API. And we are using a standard because the tools that we're going to use can understand that standard and give us a lot of goodies for free. And this is not just a standard because I say so. Standard is backed up by all of these companies, and it's been like the de facto standard for building the contract, writing the contracts of your APIs. So I really strongly suggest you guys to start using it. Now, let's go back to the use cases, because before I start writing this standard and explain you the rules, I want to recap of what we need to do. As I mentioned, we need to retrieve the list of speakers of my conference. There are gonna be more than just one conference, but today we're gonna just write a simple example. Then I need to list the activities of my conference, of a particular conference. With that, I want to build the agenda, and last, I want to go through the agenda and start providing feedback for each of the activities, or maybe each of the speakers. Now, let's get our hands dirty. let's start with the first demo, which is my first OpenAPI doc, or OAS doc. The idea is that I'm going to open SwaggerHub. I'm going to create an OpenAPI document from scratch. I'm going to use the version 3.0, which is the latest one. And I'm going to show you how to build an OpenAPI document. I'm going to try to explain to you the basics. The rest is going to be up to you. And I suggest you to start with the workshop that I created. And I'm going to show you guys the link later. But for starters, this is good enough. And if you know about REST, it's going to be super simple. Otherwise, I'm going to try to explain what I'm doing. And we're going to see how much we can get by just writing all of these contracts. So let's get into it. Now, this is SwaggerHub. Again, the URL is app.swaggerhub.com. You can just Google it and you will find it. And this is my account. I created a few APIs before, API contracts, because this is not a real API. This is just a document. But this platform will give you a lot of things by just writing some documents. So I'm going to create a new one. I'm going to use OpenAPI 3.0, and I'm going to use a template. And I'm going to say React Conference Demo version 1.0. I'm going to use the same name and title. I'm going to be the owner, and the visibility is going to be public. And I'm going to activate this Automock API. We're going to see what this means later. And I'm going to get this conference, this document. And as you see, this is just a document. This is just YAML. Doesn't mean anything else. But the power of this platform is that by just writing this YAML, we will get a lot of things for free. And let's get into it. So I'm going to switch back to this. Let's go back to the things that we need to do. Let's start with the first one. I'm probably going to just show you the first two, but then I'm going to show you the real deal because I have it in my third tab. But the idea is that I'm going to show you how to list a list of speakers of a conference, right? And for that, first of all, we need to decide what the shape of a speaker is. So let's go to this build up a sample. I'm going to just copy paste all of this. Don't worry about this for now. I'm just going to go through this slowly. But the idea is that the Swagger or the OAS, sorry about that, the OpenAPI spec has two main attributes. One is paths, where we're going to put our endpoints, or we're going to define our endpoints. And the other one is components. And this one is used to define objects, schemas, or the shapes of the entities that we're going to use. So in this particular case, since we're going to list the list of speakers, I'm going to create a speaker schema. I'm going to say that the type is object, just because this is a demo. I'm going to just mention a couple of things that I want them to be required, but for now, this is not needed. And then I'm going to list some of the properties of this object, right? And this is trivial for if you have done this before in code, right? Because I'm saying that the speaker is going to have an ID, it's going to have a name, it's going to have a description, it's going to have an URL, a GitHub account, a Twitter account, right? And for each one of them, I give you some examples. And of course, I'm mentioning or I'm telling Swagger, hey, this is the format. Even though I'm saying the type is string, I'm giving more information to OpenAPI and to Swagger as the platform to tell the format, right? In this particular case, it's UUID, sorry. In this particular case, it's URI. And that's pretty much it. The rest are regular strings. So with that, you see at the left that you have the schema well-defined. And at the right, you will see that there is already a documentation of it. We're going to see that later on, but let's say this is good enough. It's not, right? Because I'm going to now go to the speakers endpoint, and again, I'm going to copy everything. This is like a TV show where the cook is like getting everything from behind the scenes. Sorry about that, but we don't have enough time. And the idea is that I'm now telling Swagger, hey, I want to build this path, right? And I'm basically telling them that my API is going to have this path, which will retrieve the list of speakers of a particular conference and just using the edition ID as the identifier of the conference. With this, I'm telling the Swagger or with this way to use to define where the edition ID parameter is defined. And as I mentioned earlier, speakers is not enough. I need to define edition ID. So when you have to define a parameter, you need to use a different syntax. Remember that we have schemas. This is for objects. But when you have parameters, you just need to add another attribute, which is behind under components, which is parameters. And there you go. We have an edition ID. And I'm saying that the name of the parameter is edition ID, is part of the path, is of course required. We have some information about it, and the schema of the parameter is just the type string, right? So with this, I think I have almost everything, right? No, I don't. Because I wanted to also show you guys that you can also define an error response object, right, or a schema. So let's grab it from my previous API. And this is similar to what I did before, right? And just creating another schema, which is a type object, and the name is error response, and it has only one property, which is the error message, right? And this is one of the examples. So if I go to this, I'm going to see my other schema object. And with this, we can now see the speaker's endpoint. And I'm going to go through it from top to bottom. The idea is that I'm using a custom parameter. I don't know exactly what's going to be there. Maybe it's 2018, maybe it's 2019, maybe it's 2020. My idea is that I'm modeling this by using edition ID. Again, the definition of it is right below in the components/parameters section. And this endpoint allows to a get operation, which retrieves a list of speakers, and it has two responses. One is 200, and it returns all the speakers of the edition. And the other one is default, but it's usually that this is used to say, okay, if it's not 200, then you need to see the default result, which is an error, right? So we're basically saying if you receive a 200, it's a success response, and this is what you're going to get. And basically saying that I'm going to get, or the schema that my application JSON response is going to be an array of speakers, a collection of speakers. But if not, if it's not 200, then I'm going to get an error. I don't need to explain anything else, right? Now, what's the beauty of it? Do you see this button at the top right, which is view documentation? Okay, I'm going to click on it. And we're going to see the same thing that we're seeing here, but I'm going to use another tab just to show you the details. Oh, still not loading. Okay, let's wait for it. But you see at the right that you have the endpoint. And the beauty of this is that I can actually try it out. So let's say I click on this, execute, and it shows me the curl operation. It's showing me the headers, and it's giving me the answer, right? And this is, of course, an example of it. And the beauty of this is that I'm getting information, and it's using the examples that I used before. So it's not mocked up information, even though it is, but it's not auto-generated. I'm just actually telling what style it needs to use. So it gives the consumer a better idea of what he or she is going to be dealing with. And of course, it's talking about the default operation as well. So this is all great, basically. And now I'm going to fast forward and say, let's say I completed all the endpoints. And there you go, right? And let's see what we have right now, right? I mentioned that we have the get speakers, the get activities, and now we have the post to send some feedback. Now for that, not only I need the speaker schema object, I need also the activity, the feedback, and maybe a little bit more, and the response, right? And the good thing about this is that, and I'm going to switch to this one, is that now I have a link, a public link, that I can share with the consumers of my API to not only see the documentation, the live documentation of my contract, of the contract of my API, with a lot of things that I didn't code yet. And the beauty of it is that they can try it out. So again, there's no real API working behind the scenes. There's something called booking service, and we are getting a real response. And now we're going to see a little bit more about it. but I owe you the definition of this mocking service. So the idea of Swagger is that they give you a URL that will return mocked responses of your API using the examples that you provided to the documentation. And this is for free. This is what you get by just writing all the contract of your API. I didn't, you saw me, I didn't add any code to it. So this is great. So let's go back to the presentation. Quick summary. With SwaggerHub, we get a web-based editor with autocomplete. Probably I didn't show you already, but basically when I write something here, I get some information. So this is useful because if you are not used to write OpenAPI, these are hints that will help you to write about it. But it's super easy once you start writing a couple of documents. Now, what you get for free, real-time auto-generated API docs. The thing that you saw on the right, but not only that, the URL that I show you, all of this is auto-generated. So it's a neat documentation that you can use, and it's real-time and live documentation. It's tied to your contract, not to a Google Doc that you need to manually update. And last, we get an auto API mocking service or mocking integration, which means that your consumers can start hitting this endpoint and figuring out exactly how to build something on top of it. So this is great. But let's go to the second demo because this is even greater. Let's say you want to test this API, right? And this is not enough, right? This documentation is not enough. So one of the things that Swagger gives you is the ability. Sorry, there you go. Is the ability to export my API. And I'm going to use JSON unresolved. Sorry. And this particular API has integration with tools like Postman. So if you're used to use Postman, instead of this URL, you can send it JSON to your consumer. Let me see if we can. There you go. And by just doing a few clicks, you will get your own connection. Not sure which one it is because I did this a couple of times, but you will get a fully fledged collection in Postman with all the information. So let's say your consumer is more used to use Postman, then you can give them this endpoint, and you will get the same result, right? Let's say I write 2019 here, and again I'm getting a real response. Not only that, I can go and click on. Let me check if I can. There you go. I can use a curve, and I can open up a terminal. Sorry, and I can do the same. So let's say your consumer is used to use curve, then they can use it. So I show you 3 ways of consuming an API, and I got all of this by just writing this document, right? This YAML. So to me, this is great. But let's see other tools that we can use to continue our implementation. Now, we give the consumer a way to build their own UI or API or mobile application, but we can give them more than that. We can give them a client SDK. Basically, a client SDK is a way to wrap how you communicate with a particular service, how you make the fetch or the call or the call request in a way that is easier to the mobile developer to use and communicate with your API. So the third demo is about how to build a client SDK, how to get a client SDK for free with only, again, writing a document. So I'm going to show you how to do this. Basically, we go to Export, client SDK, and as you see, there are multiple options. I'm going to click TypeScript fetch, and I'm going to download it. And again, as a TV show, I have already configured all of this earlier because we don't have enough time. And again, this is part of the workshop, so you can see a really good README and details if you go to the workshop. Let's go back a little bit to exercise 2. And as you see in exercise 2, probably need to zoom in. I have 2 folders here. One is the TypeScript fetch client generated, which is something similar to what I loaded before. And then the node.conf file 2018. This is an example of a consumer of my API. So let's say I'm building this conference. This is a website. And this is a React app application. And the good thing about it is that it has a service, node.conf service that talks with my API to retrieve the list of speakers. And all of this is inherited from the node.conf API, which let's say is something that I created using the same approach. And this is basically this. Now we're going to match what is written here with the code. So what I got by downloading this that zip file is that I got an API auto-generated that has all of this information. Particularly, let's try to find the get speak edition, get activities, right? And all of this is well documented. It's also automated. I didn't add any code to it. And I can just write a service in my consumer using or by just using this client that is auto-generating. The code is awful, but at least it works, right? For instance, it's a way to get all the speakers of my conference. And it's used my code. Let's say this get speakers is then used by the app.js, the component mount to return all the speakers. So when I click on npm start, I'm going super fast because I don't have time, but you get the point, right? I'm spinning up a new website that lists the speakers and it's connected to the mocking service outside to get all the speakers. So what you see, this is the website. Let's see the network call. There you go. This is the mock service, and it's getting all the speakers, which is me. So again, I did all of this without adding a single line of code, only in the consumer, right? But hopefully you are not also the consumer. But if you are, the only thing you need to do is that. So that's great, right? And the good thing about it is that all of this is fully integrated with VS Code or other tools that understand TypeScript, and you will get all the documentation, or not only TypeScript, sorry, the documentation. In particular case, I'm using TypeScript because I get all of this for free. But if you have a different language that you want to use, you can use it, and your IDE will understand how to use it, right? And I haven't tested all of this, but we have more than 30 languages for your Kernel SDK. C# is another example. You have it in Go. I use TypeScript. There's an Angular version, and so on, right? Now, ideally, you might want to do this, but this is just an example, right? Let's say I write a document, an OpenAPI document in SwaggerHub with the content of my API. Then I store that document in GitHub because I want to version it. Then I created a client SDK and I store that in GitHub, but I use npm, Maven, or Nugget to publish that client SDK. And last, the consumer of my API, they only need to install that package in their own website or React app application or mobile application to use it. So next time, let's say I add something new, I just need to publish a new version of this client SDK. And then I need to notify somehow or tell my consumer that there's a new version available with new features, which could mean a new endpoint or a bug fix, etc., right? But more or less, probably you know about this. Let's do a quick recap just in case. First of all, by having the SDK, you have an auto-generated library that will simplify the usage and the consumption of your API. We mentioned this before. We have multiple languages, although we haven't covered all of them because we don't have any time. We don't have enough time. You may want to test or use the language that you need. And last, this is fully prepared to be managed the same way you manage a package that your consumers use. All right. Now, the last piece of it, right? I have defined the contract of my API. I have created automatically a client SDK that my consumer will use that will ease implementation of the usage of my API, but I still need to have to implement my API, right? Because everything is mock. All right. Ideally, I will show you how to do it, but we don't have enough time. So we need to do something different, right? And that's what the fourth demo is about. What I'm going to show you is basically a way to scaffold an API, which is named Serverstyle, again, without that in a single line of code. So although the code is auto-generated and it's pretty ugly, it will help you to spin up, let's say, a server in the internet to replace this mock service that Swagger is giving you, in a way that you can work on the infrastructure, have something that at least is going to give you some mock information. But then once you have that service up and running, you can then worry about the real implementation. So let's get into it. As I mentioned, this is named Serverstyle in the SwaggerHub platform. And like the client SDK, there are multiple ways of building or scaffolding one. I'm going to use Node.js server. And there you go. So let's say I unzip that file and I use it. Now, what I'm going to show you, and this is the exercise 3 of the workshop, is that, and there you go. So in this particular case, NodeConf is the website that is the consumer of my API. TypeScript fetch is the service, sorry, is a client SDK, and Node.js server is a server. So the client SDK haven't changed. It's still showing you the get edition activities or get edition speakers, right? It's doing the same thing, but this client SDK is prepared to be consumed this way. Let's go to NodeConf. So this is practically the same code we had before, but now we are instantiating the Node API by using a Serverstyle URL, right? And we're going to use localhost instead of the automod, but let's say you have this deployed elsewhere, you're going to change the URL of your deployed website with the real deal, right? So in this case, you clearly see that I'm not going to use the mock version, I'm going to use something else. Let's start with it, NodeConf. And let's start this creator React app application. And hopefully this won't work because I haven't started my API, my Node.js API. And as you see, it's not working. So this is real. This is a demo, and it's working as expected. So what I need to do next is that I need to start my ugly Node.js service, and you see that it's using localhost, and there's something extra here. So let's start with this. So what's the good thing about these automated server stubs is that you get the same documentation that you saw in Swagger for free. So although it's kind of not the same because the styles are different, you're getting the same features, right? You're getting all the documentation live right next to your code or this mock code, and you get a way to test all of this. The same way I showed you this before, right? And this is working. Again, this is a real server that is getting information. It's hitting the mock service, but this can be easily changed with the real deal. Maybe sometimes you won't need it. But let's try the real deal, right? So let's go to the NodeConf Argentina. Let's refresh it. And since I have started, I'm going to show you, probably you haven't seen it, but this service is working in localhost 8080. You are seeing a different output. You are seeing that I'm hitting my server, and you are seeing all of this information that is represented in this in the website, right? And I haven't wrote a single line of code to do all of this. All of this was for free, and I only had to write an OpenAPI document for it. So that's pretty much it. So let's end with a summary. My suggestion, instead of giving a URL with the service to the consumer, instead of giving the GitHub URL instead of giving the documentations in Google Docs, write your ROAS document first. That's the first thing you need to do, the first and foremost thing you need to do. Then you will get for free all of the things that I show you, the client SDK, the documentation automated, and the Serverstyle, which will enable other people to cover away. You are not going to block anyone. So that's the beauty of this. You can get in a couple of days something that other people can use to build their own things on top of what we are building, right? And with all of that, you will get a profit. Well, not really, right? You still need to implement the real backend, but you get the point. All right, that's all I have to share. Thank you for your time.